Okay, good morning. Good morning. We will continue this morning with our look into 1 Timothy. And I'll read the verses that we'll be looking at starting with today, and then we'll have an opening prayer. So we're in 1 Timothy chapter 2, beginning in verse 11 through verse 15. Paul writes to Timothy, "Let a woman learn in silence with all submission, and I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived. But the woman, being deceived, fell into transgression. Nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they," that is the women, "continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control." Would you say that's an innocuous passage there? No. No, it's not. I'm curious, because I never get to sit in, because I don't have any business being in the ladies' class. But we have ladies here. So how do ladies react to these verses? Different ways. Okay. Are you talking about different people in different ways, or you in different ways?
Well, different people in different ways. According, it really kind of has to do with their background. Because if you kind of grew up with this,
right?
It's nothing new, and you know what you've been taught, and you understand what it's talking about. But someone who hasn't, a lot of times, the world's view is so different that they think that being in submission or learning in silence and all that means that you really don't have a role, or you're just, or the man is supposed, that just lords over you,
Okay.
And that's not the way the Bible is talking.
Okay.
So you get
different reactions. Anybody else of the ladies? Different roles. This is something that I mentioned last week. I don't know if you remember or not. I hardly remember last week, but I did ask this question. In your opinion, are more people brought to the church and to Christ in public or in private? And most folks said in private. Why is that?
Because it's more intimate.
It's more one-on-one. It's more intimate. You can look into somebody's eyes, and if you can kind of tell if they have questions, can't you? You can read their body language. As a salesperson, that's what I was taught to do. In the first 20 seconds, read the person's body language so you'll know what type of personality they have. Do they want to be in control, or do they want you to control? Are they going to be analytical, or are they just going to look at the big picture? And you present your presentation based upon their type of personality. That's hard to do standing right here. Now, I can look at you and I can read your body language to some degree, and I can look into your eyes, but not real close. And from up there, it's even more difficult. So I think we all agree that more folks are brought to Christ and into the Lord's church through personal contact. Who are better with personal contact and conversations, men or women? There are a few, Libby says. Okay. Libby's, Willie says he's one of the few. And you had a unique background also, right? And it comes across.
And I found out that sometimes it does matter sometimes what you say, it's how you say it and what your meaning is when you talk.
Yeah. And that might be part of the problem with men is sometimes they want to take control and they want to some degree, talk down instead of letting the other person talk. You know, that is to sales, is letting the other person talk. And you know, when we're sharing the gospel of Christ, it's basically what you're doing is you're selling a, you know, I hate to say it's a product, but that's the reason I left selling advertising. I have a better product to present, a lot better product to present. And I knew if I could do it successfully there, that I could at least have a shot at doing it here. Being able to present the gospel of Christ in a manner that doesn't turn the other person off. You let the other person talk. What good does it do to let the other person talk? Because then you find their background. You can find out if they came from a denominational background or an atheistic background or an agnostic background. They have no foundation. Yeah.
I don't know, that's debatable, but they have to been so ingrained in it, it's hard sometimes to make that change, to even comprehend it.
But I can read to them out of the Bible where what they're thinking is not scriptural.
When I talk to people that never opened the Bible recently, I mean, every heard of the flood of Noah, Jonah, any of those stories that you learn early on in childhood. And sometimes that's challenging. You got to find where the beginning is.
That's why you listen. You find out where the beginning is. Because if I were to just start talking without finding out where your beginning is, I'm making an assumption. I assume you know something or you don't know something. So it's a whole lot easier and more effective to let the other person talk. And then when they're done talking, you ask them, well, what questions do you have? That's all I used to do in advertising. What questions do you have? Then I start answering questions. We do the same thing. We answer people's questions. Do you think the word silence is what turns people off? I can tell you the word that turned my mom off was the word submission. She wouldn't have anything to do with that. She would argue. She would basically make the argument, I'm not going to be under submission to anybody, man or woman.
But you know, that in there conditions of the Bible.
Oh, big conditions. The man has a big responsibility. Learning in silence. The word, and I went over this last week, is hesychia in the Greek. And it's translated, the same words translated the chapter before in 1 Timothy 2, well, in the same chapter, as peaceable. Peaceable. You have a lot less trouble with peaceable? I mean, it could have been translated that way. But when we get to 1 Corinthians 14, Paul has, and now let's remember, 1 Corinthians written in the mid-50s AD. 1 Timothy's written around 65, so it's 10 years later. Has the doctrine changed in 10 years? No. Now, a different word is used for silence there. And here it's talking about absolute silence. And the word used for females In Greek, there's not an absolute word for females, for women. There is one for men. The word that's used there designating women is literally in the Greek is married women. So in 1 Corinthians 14, Paul's saying to the women, if you have questions, ask your husband. Is that what we do now? Is that what you ladies do now if you're married? And if you're not married, you can ask, get permission, I guess, but ask somebody else's husband or ask an elder. But the idea is that worship service is supposed to be done in order, without confusion. 1 Corinthians 14:33, 1 Corinthians 14:40. God is not the author of confusion, but of what? Peace, as in all the congregations. But what we're talking about here in the context is the specific worship service. So are we in worship service now? No, because we don't have the 5 elements of worship. So is it entirely permissible for women to speak up now? Yeah. And I haven't been anywhere where they weren't willing to, right? Ladies are willing to speak up. They seem to be strong-minded, have their own opinions and thoughts. But in both 1 Corinthians 14 and in 1 Timothy 2, the context is the specific worship service. Do you ladies have any problem with not being able to be song leaders or leaders of prayer? We got one of them here that says no.
But I do have a question.
Okay.
I don't know what chapter it was, but I looked at it last week where it talks about, maybe it was the Corinth church, where the women did pray in church and they had to pray with their heads covered.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do read throughout the Bible that there are many women who are prophets.
Right, they are.
Prophesy and and prophesy to men, and you've got the women who ministered unto Jesus, and so I think that women do have a part, and I can't find anywhere where it says a woman can't pray.
No.
In church, nowhere do I see that, and I think you're right in that we have to take this all into context. That these were very pagan cities, and so I'm going to guess that the majority of the Jews, the Gentiles who were converting, were probably men, and so yes, I agree that back then there were extreme laws about what men and women did in the household, job-wise.
Christianity, we probably don't think about this, but in the other cultures at the same time, women were not respected. Look at what Christianity does for women. Are women highly respected in the Lord's church? Did Jesus highly respect women? Aquila and Priscilla. Acts chapter 18. Was Priscilla a part of the teaching of Apollos, of the right way? Now, she did it with her husband. Are ladies allowed to teach? It doesn't say ladies can't teach, period. It just says when you are in the presence of Christian men. So do ladies teach all the time? Teach their children. They teach classes in here. Women do a lot of teaching. This word here for silence, it says it means peaceable. Can a lady sit here and pray all she wants to? Yes. Can she sing all she wants to? Yeah. If at the end of the sermon, when I offer an invitation, can a woman come forward and confess that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God? Yes. Because it's still done within the parameters of being peaceful or peaceable, but not causing a disruption. That's what's being talked about here. Not causing a disruption. But then we go to the next verse. I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. And the same word for silence is there. The very same word in the Greek. Other translations, the New King James says, I do not permit. The King James says, but I suffer not. That's Old English. The American Standard says, I permit not. The word is epiprepeo, and it means I do not allow, I do not give liberty, I do not let, I do not permit. But like I said, it's not a blanket restriction, because when we go to Titus, what's Titus say? Older ladies, what is your responsibility? Is that a big responsibility? Because if the younger ladies don't know what they should know, how are they going to teach the next generation of younger ladies? And where do you end up? Well, you end up in a society a whole lot like what we're living in right now. Anybody want to disagree with that? They do a lot of that, don't they? And grandbabies. We had a grandbaby in our arms yesterday afternoon, 3-4 months old. So Libby want to teach that little grandbaby? Yeah.
Well, good example. Timothy himself, his mother and grandmother.
Yeah. Yeah. You remember Timothy's dad was what? Yeah, he was Greek. He was a Gentile. But here's the person that Paul's writing to in 1 Timothy who was taught by his grandmother and his mother. It's a perfect example. What's being talked about here literally is that women are not allowed to deliver an instructional discourse in the presence of Christian men. So, question becomes this: nor to have authority over a man. The ASV says to have a dominion is the word translated from the original. So at what point would a woman have authority? Now I'm talking about in worship service. At what point would a woman have authority or dominion over a Christian man? At what point? In worship service. Yes.
There is, for instance, ladies can let you know what they'd like to hear a lesson on. So in that way, they are helping out, and they do.
And they.
For, I think what to pray for this morning. Maybe if you all like to make say, hey, we've got people in other.
They need prayers.
Prayer. Yeah. There's just all kinds of.
Women can, to your point, Charles, women can make all kinds of input. They can affect the prayers. They can affect my sermon. If you come up with a good idea, and it's happened. I've had Gloria has said, Jim, can you speak on a certain subject? And I'll say, well, I think it's an appropriate time. I have to get time to put it together. But yeah, I'm more than happy to take suggestions. I might not take them, but I'm willing to listen. At what point in a worship service does a woman take dominion or authority over a man?
Not in worship service at all.
But if she were to,
If she teaching, preaching class.
We're talking about in
in
worship.
worship,
In worship, the only time I would know that it might be appropriate to speak up.
I'm not saying it's appropriate. I'm saying when would she take authority?
Is if the man was speaking an error.
Uh-huh.
If he was teaching something contrary to God's law, and if I'm married, I'm gonna tell Ken, I'm gonna say, Kenny, of course I don't have to.
Well, your elders will probably put an end to that real fast.
What I'm saying is, if there are congregations that have strong elders or strong men to do that, and if her husband refuses, that would be the only time I would think, and I don't know that I would. I would probably just get up and leave.
That would probably be the thing to do.
But that would be the only time that I would even.
See if you agree with this. Anytime, in a worship service, worship setting, anytime a woman were to stand up so that all attention is given to her and she proceeds to carry out some type of function or oration, would she be taking authority over the worship service?
Yes.
So in what ways in worship would she be doing that? If she were doing what? Preaching, leading singing. What's that? Leading the prayer in public, communion. Will you agree with that? Anytime you're standing up and all eyes are upon the woman, does she not have theoretically control over that part of the worship service?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that what Paul's talking about here? Yeah, it would seem so. In my experience, I found that in my contact with the ladies in the church has been that they're not really interested in standing up and doing that. But I went and spoke at a place not too long ago where the women were in charge of everything and were more than happy to be in charge of everything. In fact, they expected to be in charge of everything. They let me give the sermon, but the ladies did everything else. How did that come to be? Can they not read? If I were to stand up, how do you think it would have gone if I had picked out these verses for the scripture reading for the sermon when I had been there?
You would not have been invited back.
I probably would not have been allowed to speak.
Yeah, it's very controversial, and or it can be, especially with women's lib and me movement and all of that. But you're right; it's in black and white right there.
So what would I do? Would I tear the page out of my Bible? Or just that little part of the page and say, I guess this doesn't matter anymore?
You say that's cultural. It was true back then because the women were not really considered full citizens. They were second class.
They were second class citizens.
So therefore, it doesn't apply to us today because it was a cultural thing.
Or in the Lord's church, are women second class Christians?
No. No sense.
What they try to do is they try to harmonize today's culture with the
try to go with your current culture, but think we are so short-sighted. We only think within our generation or within our 50 years. But you know, people have said the same thing for thousands of years. One of the big arguments for introducing instrumental music in 1850 in denominational churches was, well, we are modern people. They were still using leeches to cure people. But we are modern. Everybody says the same thing in their own time. But has God changed?
And if you keep reading, he gives the reason.
And that's where we're going.
That reason has not changed.
No, and it's not going to change. Now you've got to accept the reasoning. What is the reason given?
Because she was seduced. Eve became way after Adam, and Adam already knew God, already knew what he expected. And she didn't go and ask God. She didn't go and ask Adam, hey, this thing over here came and said it would be okay. So what do you think about that? She never asked Adam's opinion. She never asked for his advice, nothing. She took it upon herself.
She didn't ask God either, did she?
No, but had she asked Adam, Adam already knew God, already had been walking with God and knew what God believed in, and Adam probably would have stopped her, but Adam could have said no also, but he became very, very weak and let someone influence him, and I think that's the whole context here.
Did they both have personal relationships with God? Could they both go to God and talk? Were they walking with God in the Garden of Eden?
Yeah, it came in the afternoon, right? You walked in the garden.
Walked in the garden. So, of course, the argument is that Adam was formed first and that Eve was deceived. Does that let Adam off the hook? Ladies. Does that let Adam off the hook? And who was he talking to? God. How did that argument go over? Not too well. No. What Paul was saying, remember, this is Timothy, who is the preacher in the congregation in Ephesus. And they have elders there. The directive is women are not to usurp authority that God has given to men. In the Lord's church, God has given men the responsibility to be leaders in the Lord's church. Is that a problem for the ladies? I'm asking. Is that a problem for you? Now, it's a problem for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So that was in the 50s and 60s. So in the last 50 years, I guess what you're saying is things have changed.
Our culture has women are being out in the world today. Young girls being taught, and not incorrectly, but not in the right context, but they're being taught that if you are not, how am I trying to say this? Having a different role, you know, if you let someone say that you have the traditional woman's role, then that means that you are weaker, or that you're not, you know, it's that men are saying that that they are superior to you. And that's not it. What we have to remember is that different doesn't mean not equal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just means different. It doesn't mean that one's better than the other on either side. It's just different.
And that's the point I was trying to make when I began, that women in all likelihood have more effect on bringing people to Christ and to the Lord's church than men do. They have a role. The men's role is during worship is in public. In public worship, the men are the leaders. But once you get outside of that hour, women can do anything they want to do pretty much, can't they? And they do. And they have a huge effect upon people being brought to Christ. Last verse here, 15. I had a lady come to me in Rutherfordton, the grown daughter of an elder, in all seriousness. And she said, would you mind looking into what it means that women, shall be saved in childbearing, but is there more after the word childbearing? If they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. Now, I'm sure the ladies' classes sometime in the past have talked about this. And I'd be interested in hearing because there are a lot of ideas about what this means. And I don't know if one's right and one's wrong, because it's a pretty nebulous statement here. Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Nevertheless, she, that is the women, will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. I'm open. The class is open to the ladies.
The first command, 3 of the 5 commands that God gave Adam and Eve in the garden, 3 of them were about human reproduction. Mm-hmm. To be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. And again in the punishments after Eve ate fruit, she was going to have sorrow, pain,
and childbearing.
So the role, one of the roles of women is to bear the child. A man cannot do that.
Right.
So it's not saying that if you cannot have children, because look at Sarah. Before, her having Isaac was all God. She was barren. But yet she was not considered, in God's eyes, she was not whole, she was not unworthy of or being unfaithful. That's what I'm trying to look for. Because she could not have children.
Okay. I came across this, and see what you think. Childbearing symbolizes woman's God-given duties. You got that? Childbearing symbolizes woman's God-given duties. Are a woman's sins washed away the same way a man's sins are washed away? Okay, so is there any difference there? No. Do women have specific roles to fulfill in the eyes of God? One of them being childbearing. But they have other roles also, many other roles in the eyes of God. Women are supposed, in the context of what we're reading here, women are supposed to perform their godly roles, and men are expected to perform their godly roles. How about men who refuse to be leaders in the Lord's church, if they're capable? Are they fulfilling their godly role? Now, we don't talk about that. But do men carry a responsibility? I mean, it may be something simple, but what one is capable of doing. In that aspect, men are working in God's eyes in the public role of saving mankind. You go with that? Women do the very same thing in a non-public way. Saving mankind. We got the same goal, we just go about it in different ways. One is specifically in public, and one is all other times. And I came across this, and I thought I wouldn't mention it, but I can't help myself. Came across this person who wrote this, and I wanted to get your ideas. First, I'll ask this question. In general, are there more women in the Lord's church than men? Got a lot of yeses there. Why? Why are there more women in the Lord's church than men? Got real quiet. Sounds like crickets in here. Okay, we'll pick on Charlie then.
Women realize their obligation to submit, and will submit easier to Christ than men. Don't usually like to submit to much of anything.
That's a good answer. Women tend to be more submissive and will submit to the gospel of Christ more readily than men. I wrote this down trying to answer the question. Are women more interested in spiritual concerns than men are? I imagine the women would say yes, and the men say, I don't know. But this leads to the question I was thinking about not asking. All of this being true, will there be more women in heaven than men? I got a probably over here. Ever thought about that before? That's right. And there's no marriage. All right? Matthew chapter 22.
One other reason that could be is that women have a tendency to live longer than men, at least in today's society.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have more, like, widows than you do widowers. As they get older, you have more of the women than you have, you know what I'm trying to say? The men would, for lack of...
Are the men who die earlier not going to make it to heaven because they died earlier?
How about in the church? When you're talking about more women in the church.
Okay.
They have more, that, you know, because, and I think that was true maybe back here. I mean, for a couple of reasons. Paul addresses that women can win over their husbands. He never talks about the husband winning over the woman. So it seems to me like there were more women that believed before their husbands than vice versa. Plus, he talks about taking care of the widows.
Mm-hmm. Widows who were really widows.
Right. Widows.
We get to that in 1 Timothy chapter 5, don't we? Okay. She brought up the point that a lot of women bring their husbands or future husbands to the church. There you go. Yeah. Am I an example of that? Yeah. Oh, we got another example over here. Okay. See, ladies have such a big influence. Okay, we only got a couple of minutes left, so I don't see any need to change the board. Okay?
The elders have oversight of all teaching. And yet, when there's a ladies' class, if an elder shows up in that ladies' class, they will end up having influence in it because there's a man present.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be a way that we can still oversee a ladies' class without being in the ladies' class.
I guess you could record it.
You could, but you gotta have confidence in the ladies that are in the class.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, isn't it? Yeah.
So we do, and you can be a part where you're not in the class, but you can hear the class.
Right.
You can do that, but who knows? The class might be in there trying to have a coup on the elders. Or you just may hear something and wonder you would want to address that. But we have oversight of everything. Where I've been, elders could show up in the elementary school classes. They could show up anywhere. They could go in any class.
Well,
To monitor the class.
I would strongly suspect that there would be more than one woman if something was being taught incorrectly that would approach an elder after the class and say, I have a question about this, what do you think? Which would give the elders an opportunity to address the teacher about that. But of course, the thought was already out. But
You could be available also to answer those questions if they happen to come up during the class.
yeah.
You might be back in your office.
And sometimes I am, on purpose, staying out of the way, because for the very reason you say, if I show up, I am interrupting their class. Okay, our time is up. Boy, that time went fast. Okay, so next week we go into looking at elders. I do have 1 minute. Why do you think so much information is given about elders?
Because they have so much influence over the health of the congregation.
But how many organizations of the Lord, of churches, of Christianity, do not have elders? They have boards of whatever. They have deacons without elders. They have pastorships where the preacher is the authoritarian rule. What do you do with that chapter? What do you do with chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1? I have to tear some more pages out? You have left what's in the Bible what you want in the Bible, don't you? Yeah. Okay. We have any questions, comments, observations about what we've talked about this morning? Okay, so we're moving on from the ladies. Now we're going into the eldership. Okay, thank you very much.